When I work with a writer, I will train them through creative integration. So what we will do is we will make them write to their weakness and hide their strength. So if I'm right-handed, I do everything with my right hand, and my left hand is really uncoordinated. If I literally tie my right hand behind my back for a month and I do everything with my left hand, it's going to get stronger and more coordinated. Now, during that month, I might spill a lot of things and be very inefficient, but over time, I'll develop my left arm, my coordination, the strength. Then I'll learn how to integrate the two. So for a conceptual writer, they will work exclusively from the intuitive part. They will learn how to turn off the conceptual part. The conceptual part is the part that has all these big ideas and worries about story law. It has all this anxiety and judgment, and you turn that off and teach them how to create from a pure, authentic, emotional space. Now, their writing may not be well structured. It may not be something they're going to show an agent, but they will, through that process, their characters will come alive. Their dialogue will come alive. And one of the key things when I do intuitive training is to get you to think about something in your life where you feel something very strong, and then your writing, when other people read it, they're going to feel what you feel. So you can get people to have the emotional experience you had when you wrote it. Then when I help you learn how to discover actual characters, and there's a whole bunch of training to get to the point where that's a real person for you, then you can write that person from what they're feeling, and people will feel that. Then you can start putting characters into conflict, and it'll all be authentic characters. And so that's the intuitive training. And when they get to the point where their characters and their dialogue and everything is organic and authentic as best as the best writers out there, then I'll teach them how to integrate that back to the conceptual side so that they'll have the best possible stories and the best possible characters. And then obviously for an intuitive writer, it's the opposite. They will turn that part of their brain off. They'll work purely from conceptual until they're a rock star, and then we'll integrate. And that process, it's just so rewarding to work with writers, because if they come out the other end, literally their agent, their manager, or their spouse will say, they'll read a script and say, I love you, but you didn't write this. I hear this all the time. I don't believe you wrote this because your stories aren't this crisp and compelling. I mean, this has all your great character work, but you can't, like, who helped you with the stories? Or someone will say, you don't write characters this great. I love you, I love your writing, but this is like, Orange is the New Black or Mad Men. I mean, this is just that high level of characters. And it's like, it literally is transformative. And then the last thing I'll say, which is really cool about creative integration, is that most writers, occasionally they have these flow days where everything is just pouring out of them and is so great. You're doing your best material and you love those days and you wish you could live in those days. And then writers have those days which are the exact opposite, where you're pounding your head against the wall just trying to get something on the page. And I think for most writers that I work with, they're often somewhere in between. The really great thing about creative integration is almost all your days will be flow days, because this is what causes flow. This is what happens. When a writer's writing, there's what would be best for the story. What is the best thing to make the story move forward in the most interesting way? And a lot of writers, especially intuitive writers, they don't know the answer. And that's really confusing and frustrating. Excuse me. Now, even if you do know the answer, and let's say it's that, then of course, what would my character really do? And if it's the same thing, and then you ask yourself, what do I most want to write today? Like, what gets me most exciting about writing today? It's the same thing. All three navigational systems line up. That's a flow day. That's when it's all coming out of you. It's your best writing. You want to live in those days. When you don't know what the character would do, or you don't know what's best for the story, or you know, but this is what's best for the story, this is what the character would do, this is what you most want to write, those are the worst days. So what creative integration does is it allows people to train and know with a suite of tools what would be best for my story. They'll be able to go to another part and know what would my character really do. They'll go to another part and know what they're most interested in writing. And then they'll have tools to integrate, which is to bring those three things into alignment. And so I can't say that every writing day will be a flow day, but most of the writers I've trained, they'll say, used to be 10 to 20% were flow days. Now it's like 80%. And so not only does the quality of the writing greatly improve, but so does the quantity.
So let's say somebody knows, I'm very right-brained,
okay.
I'm very intuitive,
right.
and I resonate with music and emotions and color,
right.
but I really have trouble connecting the dots
right.
and staying on task.
Right.
And I'm actually speaking personally about myself. So
okay.
if I know that about myself as a
Right.
writer, and I know that what's going to show up on the page is that the story is going to lack any kind of continuity, probably there's going to be
Right.
some issues. How do I rein myself in? Because as a right brain person, that's one of my issues. I have trouble reining myself in.
Sure.
So how would somebody who's so used to being, I'm going to go with this emotion, I'm going to go with this,
Right. So
make themselves more
right.
linear?
So it's different for every writer, but generally speaking, what I would probably do if I was working with you is, the first thing I would say is, we're going to turn off your intuitive side and develop your conceptual side so that you're going to be able to naturally and easily be able to connect the dots, but not only connect the dots, but do it with real strong stakes and clarity and strong escalations. And you're going to be able to create as strong of a story as anyone in the industry. And that story, in a sense, is a glass. And then we're going to teach you how to pour your characters and your dialogue and your emotion and all of that intuitive stuff into that structure, so that now your characters and your dialogue will be in service of a super strong story. So, and then usually the writer's like, oh, that's exciting, I want to do that, how do I do that? Then I say, okay, well, here's step one. I want you to imagine that we're going to go behind the barn and take everything that you love about writing and we're just going to shoot it in the head. And that's when the writer's like, oh, I don't want to do that. But that's what it feels like, because what we need to do is turn off that part of you that is that dreamy, intuitive, emotional, connective, instinctive part of you. Now, we're not going to kill that forever. That is such a valuable part of you. But we are literally going to turn it off. Because here's the thing. If it's on, your conceptual brain can't be on. They both can't be on at the same time. They're connected by a corpus callosum, and just physiologically speaking, they can't be on at the same time. It would short circuit the fight or flight mechanism. So we're going to turn this off. And so the training in the beginning is we're going to be creating simple stories and then more complex stories and eventually scripts, but there'll be no characters and there'll be no dialogue. And we're literally like going to be playing with just puppets. And we are going to be doing, I'm going to drill you day in and day out, week in and week out on exercises for story logic and for story continuity. But so if I may back up, there's a really cool class out there called Drawing from the Right Side of the Brain. Drawing from the Right Side of the Brain. And they have the before and after pictures. They have these people who are terrible illustrators. And they do self-portraits. And you look at it and you're like, I wouldn't even call these stick figures because that'd be an insult to stick figures. These are terrible drawings. And then they have 3 days later, the same person does their same self-portrait. And it's like, this is amazing. Like, how can someone in 3 days go from being such a terrible drawer to such an amazing drawer? And so the key is she has broken down the drawing into 5 specific skill sets. And one of them is contrast. One of them is shapes. And this is the key. She teaches you contrast, or she teaches you shapes completely separate from all the others. So you can't learn shaping if you're worried about what the picture looks like, if you're worried about it being a good picture. You just learn shaping. You just learn contrast. You just learn color. I actually don't know what the 5 things are by heart, but you learn all 5 things in isolation. And then at the end, she teaches you how to integrate it. So that's what we would do. So we would be drilling you on story logic. And you'd have a whole week of those exercises, but they're not real characters. It's not a script you're working on. These are just training exercises. Then we're going to drill you on 5 weeks of story causality. Then we're going to work on logic and clarity and perspective. And then we're going to be working on escalations. Then we're going to be creating conceptually strong characters and moving them. And you're going to ultimately create a story where we don't know anything about the characters. We have no emotional connection. But when you look down at that story, you're going to say that has a clear beginning, middle, and end. It has forward momentum and escalations. If that story was populated with super compelling characters and dialogue, it could be amazing. And you're just going to be able to do that over and over again. You probably won't enjoy this training. It probably won't be fun. In fact, writers usually complain because they're like, this feels like math. And this is, I want to be a writer because I hate math.
Right.
When can we do the fun stuff? And it's like, you cannot do the fun stuff until you are an expert at this.